千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Daodejing by Lao Zi. We start out with the basic levels in the Tao of Communication. At the lowest level, we learn to elevate our discourse. What I mean by that is we learn to pick better topics to elevate the level of the discourse. So there's a useful quote that I would like to present. It goes like this: great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. And who said this? Former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. She is a much cherished, much loved figure from our history. She was extremely wise, well-read, and there are many wise quotes from her, this being one of them. Because she was so well-read and knowledgeable, she probably took that from other wisdom that was already existing at her time. And when I investigated on the origin of this particular concept about great minds, average minds, and small minds, I quickly learned that way before Eleanor Roosevelt, back in 1901, there was an autobiography by Charles Stewart. Charles Stewart recalled from his life interactions with a scholar by the name of Henry Thomas Buckle. And Henry Thomas Buckle, the scholar, was fond of saying that people, men and women, can be divided into three classes, three orders of intelligence, and you can tell the lowest class of intelligence, you can tell by their habit of always talking about other people. And the next higher up is the fact that their habit is to always talk about things. So it's better than to talk about people, but they're talking about things. Maybe objects, material objects to pursue in the material world. And the highest level, the highest class of intelligence, said the scholar, was by preference to talk about ideas, discuss ideas. So I want to point out that when you pick and choose what you talk about, it's not necessarily reducing the amount that you talk about. It just improves the quality of your topics. So this is why, in the overall scheme of the Tao, we begin with this, not reducing the quantity, but improving the quality. Then, what about the level up, the mid-level, the intermediate level in the Tao of Communication? Well, that's where we talk about mindfulness. We learn to be mindful of the following, and there are three categories to be mindful of. Category A, the violent. The violent doesn't have to be physically violent. It could be violent in terms of communication, choice of communication. Think of it as angry words, anger, animosity, or as you see here, aggression, accusations. These all fit in the A category. Words of anger can potentially cause the most damage because they're usually said thoughtlessly, right? Later, you may regret it, wish you hadn't said it. You would do anything to take them back. But in that moment of calmness, it's already too late to take back the words that were said in the heat of the moment. So that's category A. Category B is the egocentric. That is bragging, boasting, to be bombastic, to, a lot of bluster is what we're talking about. Category B. This is because words of arrogance exposes one's ignorance. So people who assume a low profile are the ones who go far in life. Conversely, those who keep trying to show off are the ones who cannot get very far. Those who are truly humble are the ones who can truly win people over. That's why it's important to be mindful of the egocentric speak, the egocentric talk, to refrain from boasting or bragging. Category B. So we've done A and B. What about C? Let's go there. C is the negative energy. Complaints, criticisms. This is basically about condemnation. Complaints are sort of like slow poison. When you complain to other people, you may think that you are venting your frustration. In reality, what always happens, the sages have noted, is that complaints can sap your strength, reduce your motivation. When you keep complaining, you are reminding yourself of all the reasons why you should not do anything. Therefore, they will negatively affect yourself as well as the people around you. And this is why Tao cultivators watch themselves. They reduce or eliminate their complaints. When you are mindful of these three categories, you will naturally go to a place of making less and less statements that fall into these categories. This is therefore the second level, the intermediate level, where you begin reduction of the quantity of what you say. So step one, improve the quality of what you say. Step two, begin to reduce the quantity, to weed out, to keep out the violence, the egocentric, and the negative. The third level, which is the level that Lao Tzu is advocating in chapter 52, this chapter that we're studying. So what is it all about? Well, it's basically shut the door and close the mouth. It's basically to consider the possibility and then put into practice the virtue of silence. So I gotta emphasize again that this wisdom is universal. It is by no means limited to the East. All over the world, since historical times, people have found that it's virtuous, it's a good idea to be silent, to talk less, and sometimes to talk not at all. And you have seen in the basic level that I used a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt and others before her that depicted the wisdom of picking and choosing your topics carefully. Now, I would like to continue that by using more quotes in the West that depict the same levels of wisdom that Lao Zi is talking about in 52. The first quote that I would like to present is the following. Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens. I like this quote because it is simplistic. This is often attributed to Jimi Hendrix, the famous guitar legend. Now, there's no hard, solid, documented proof that he actually said this, but it's very common to have this attribution to Jimi Hendrix. When researched, it turns out that way before the time of Jimi Hendrix, Oliver Wendell Holmes had written back in the 1800s that it is the province of knowledge to speak, and it is the privilege of wisdom to listen. So I like that even more because it is making it very clear that knowledge can lead one to talk a lot. But when one is wise, possessing wisdom, you begin to realize that it's a privilege to be receptive, to listen rather than to speak. This is one of the reasons why Lao Tzu says, well, you should close the mouth. Then there's a more recent example, another quote. This quote is, I never learned anything while I was talking. You may recognize this as being from television and radio host Larry King, who recently passed away. Now, one of the things that made him famous, one of the things that for which he was seen as a great example was how he always listened so intently in every interview that he would be paying full attention to what his guest was saying. This was seen as an exception, as exceptional, as a departure from what many people do. And you know what many people do as you are conversing with them. They appear to be listening to you, but you can tell, looking at their eyes, looking at their expression, that they politely pretend to listen to what you're saying while they are formulating in their minds, they're preparing, rehearsing what they're going to say as soon as you pause to take a breath. So Larry King it always seemed obvious to all that he was paying full attention to his guest. And this was seen as a great value in his role as eventually a very famous host. It brought him a lot of success. That one simple thing, to listen instead of talk over your guest, brought him all the renown and success that he enjoyed. Now, it turns out that he was certainly not the first to uncover this particular wisdom that was very beneficial. When researching this quote, we can go back actually to former President Lyndon Johnson. He was the 36th President of the United States. He said, you aren't learning anything when you are talking. So this is another similar phrasing of the same idea. Instead of I, President Johnson used you instead, but the meaning is the same. One never learns anything while one is talking. Same idea. And this is, again, consistent with the reasoning of Lao Tzu, why we should close the mouth, because, not only is it the privilege of wisdom to listen, but you never learn anything when you're talking. Lastly, one more quote, loose lips sink ships. So the first two quotes, as you have seen, they're all from Western traditions, Western culture. Same with quote, the third quote here, loose lips sink ships. This came from World War II. At the time that historically America was engaging the Japanese Navy in the Pacific theater of war. And this expression is an idiomatic expression meaning beware of unguarded talk. That can lead to risk exposure, can lead to problems in the war effort. And what you see here in the graphic, this was the first of the many propaganda posters during World War II. Now, it turns out that this was more important than even what people thought at the time. History also records that back in 1943, in the middle of the war, World War II, Congressman Andrew May had made a mistake. This is an American congressman from Kentucky. Andrew May had made an error, which was exactly the loose lips that we're talking about. He was privy to military intelligence, and at a press conference, he made the foolish mistake of revealing how, up until that time, American submarines in the Pacific theater of war, how they were so successful in evading Japanese attacks. So at the time, the way that the warfare was conducted with against submarines is that destroyers would let loose depth charges that would sink to a certain level before exploding. And if it was close enough to the submarines, that would be catastrophic. It would destroy the submarine. It turns out that the Japanese did not set the depth charges deep enough. It was too shallow. So American submarines were able to go a lot deeper. They dived a lot deeper than the level of the charges and therefore escaped unharmed. When this was revealed, naturally, the reaction from the Japanese Navy was to increase the depth of their charges. So the American Navy estimated that because of this, they lost 10 submarines and 800 crewmen. They died. This is a very dire consequence of loose lips. Literally, loose lips sank ships, caused the loss of lives. If this was true, then Congressman Andrew May inadvertently caused 1 in 5 of all submarine casualties in the entire World War II. So this is just to illustrate how important it was, and this is a haunting image of the submarine destroyed, sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Hopefully this is a reminder that it can indeed be the case that loose lips sink ships, and what that means to our lives is that we have to be careful what we say. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.